When my husband returned home from work, what he brought with him was his best friend from junior high. It was surprising enough, but to remarry. Since we got married, have you been of any use? No, right? Well, I'm not working now, but... See? But that's because you told me to be a housewife. Oh, come on, don't blame me. You could have refused, right? My husband continued to berate me. You're worthless. I don't need someone who can't earn a single penny. So, you're leaving me to remarry? Yes. I want a divorce from you. I was not someone to just accept my fate without a fight. My husband knew nothing. My true identity. Are you sure about this? Yes. I've fallen in love with your best friend. And she's pregnant. Pregnant? I see. Well, that's wonderful news. I wasn't surprised by anything I heard. At that moment, I might have been unemployed, but in reality, I had become the next CEO candidate for the company my husband worked for. I found out about this just a week ago. Then, let's get a divorce. After the divorce was finalized, I was on my way to the company to give my speech as the new president. And then, I met my ex-husband again. Why are you here? Long time no see. Mr. Incompetent Employee. What did you say? Thinking it was a good moment, I told my ex-husband the truth. His face turned pale instantly. It was truly amusing. Please. Can't you forgive me? Facing my ex-husband, who was begging for forgiveness, I decided to show him further hell. I am Kelly Irving, turning 35 this year. After graduating from university, I joined a company that mainly dealt with confectionery product development. Ever since I was a child, I loved creating things. My work achievements were recognized, and I was promoted to section chief. I have someone I want to introduce you to. Someone you want to introduce? You said you wanted a boyfriend before, right? Well, yes, but... Thus, Rachel, my best friend from junior high, brought up the topic. At that time, I was 33 years old. Nice to meet you, I'm Greg Hill. I look forward to today. Likewise, I look forward to it. This was the beginning of my relationship with Greg Hill, who would later become my husband. My first impression was that he was a good young man, seemingly very popular. What? The same company? I was surprised too. Who would have thought we'd be at the same place? Greg was 3 years younger than me and seemed to be looking for a girlfriend. It turns out, Rachel was a friend from college. Greg and I quickly became good friends due to our shared workplace. You're a section chief, Kelly? Well, yes. But it's not that big of a deal. Yes, it's amazing. I wonder why I hadn't noticed before. Greg, you're in sales, right? In our company, we don't have much interaction among employees. I only had a good impression of Greg, who listened eagerly. After several dates, we started dating. Both work and private life were fulfilling. Though younger, Greg took the lead in our private life. I was happy about that. Kelly, I have something important to tell you, he said with a serious expression. I thought this might be it and started to feel excited. I want you to marry me. If you're okay with me. I was 34 years old at the time. There was a definite thought that if I let this opportunity pass, I might never get married. But more than that, I wanted to walk through life with this person. After finishing greetings with both families, all that was left was to submit the marriage registration. Kelly, after we get married, could you become a housewife? Why? Well, I think it's odd if the wife's position is above the husband's. I don't think that matters. Greg then glared at me. At that moment, I felt fear towards Greg for the first time. I had no choice but to agree. A silence followed. Anyway, I'm counting on you. Oh, okay. Originally, we planned to submit the marriage registration immediately. However, Greg insisted on waiting until I resigned from my job. I should have discussed it more, but I panicked, thinking we couldn't get married if things stayed the same. The next day, I consulted with my boss immediately. Being a manager, I was asked to reconsider. Could you reconsider your decision? I'm sorry. I've already made up my mind. I see. How should I explain this to the president? The president? Actually, the president holds you in high regard. Remember? He particularly liked the collaboration product with the popular character you proposed. I didn't know that about the president. Feeling a bit guilty for leaving, considering how much thought they had put into my career. I couldn't think of any other way to get married. Time seemed to be running out. Well, your happiness is the most important thing. By the way, your husband works in sales, right? Yes, that's right. Greg Hill. Greg, got it. I then said goodbye to the subordinates who had worked under me. They were sad, but happy for my marriage. After spending some time saying farewell, I left the company. I probably won't return here again. With that, I headed home. I'm home. So? Did you quit? Yes. I've said all my goodbyes, so everything should be fine now. I see. Then, Greg smiled in a way that gave me a bad feeling all over. What's wrong? Now, I've become the head of this house. I was thinking about that. What are you talking about? Until now, Kelly, you were on top, but from now on, you'll follow my instructions. Instructions? Greg then sat on the sofa and began giving orders under the guise of instructions. I feel like drinking. Can you go buy some? Right now? From now on, you'll be living off the money I earn. It's only natural. What Greg was saying wasn't wrong. Thinking it would be easier if that satisfied him, I decided to go buy it. When I returned, Greg had already fallen asleep, presumably tired. Since he didn't wake up, I just covered him with a blanket and went to sleep myself. Why didn't you wake me up yesterday? You didn't wake up. So, I just left you. Please, next time, make sure to do it properly, okay? Okay. From this time on, he began to take a more domineering attitude towards me. He became increasingly unrestrained. During this time, I received a call from Rachel. How's married life? Well, it's going smoothly. I guess. I lied. Honestly, just a few days into the marriage. I was already feeling anxious about whether we could really make it work. I didn't want to worry Rachel, who had gone to the trouble of introducing Greg to me. That's good to hear. Then I don't need to worry. Well, it's still early days. You'll be fine. I'll help out with anything.
Yeah.
Thanks. I was a bit concerned about her last remark. But having a best friend like Rachel to talk to was reassuring. Time passed, and I started to want children. Greg agreed to this as well. However, we couldn't conceive easily. I was considering fertility treatments when I found out. It looks like I'm pregnant. You did say you haven't had your period. That's great.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to be a father. Greg seemed happy. I believed this would soften him a bit. But my morning sickness, which often ends around the 10th week, continued into the later stages of pregnancy. At first, Greg accepted it as unavoidable. But as my inability to do household chores due to morning sickness increased, he became displeased. Hey. How long are you going to rest? Can you start working soon? Your job is to take care of the house, right? Sorry. I'm just feeling too sick. Greg sighed heavily. Are you really in pain? What? You're not lying and slacking off, are you? Why would I do that? If I could, I'd do everything properly. I became assertive in response to Greg, who couldn't understand my suffering. It seems Greg thought I was snapping back at him. Is that a complaint towards me? Not exactly. I just want you to understand. If you have the energy to talk so much, then please clean and do the laundry. After giving me instructions, Greg left without saying where he was going. Left alone in the house, I wondered how long I had to endure this. Eventually, the day of childbirth arrived without any help from Greg, who did not attend the birth, and I gave birth to a boy named Max. Even after returning home from the hospital, Greg's attitude remained unchanged. Come on, give him a cuddle. I don't really know how. I'll pass for now. Just for a little while. I'm telling you it's okay. Greg's attitude towards our adorable son was cold. No, it seemed like he was mostly uninterested. Still, I tried to act for the sake of our son. He is, after all, the only father my son has. What time will you be home today? I don't know. So you can go to bed first. But Max will be asleep by then, at least say goodnight to him now. Greg's face turned puzzled. Sorry, but I have to go now. Take care of the rest. Wait a minute. My voice didn't reach him as Greg left for work. I've never felt so angry at Greg before. At noon, I received a call from the director I used to work with. How are you doing? I called today because I have a favor to ask. A favor? I decided to listen to what he had to say, and that became the trigger for my revenge. The president has come up with something quite outlandish. Again? Yes. The president of the company I used to work for was known for being quite eccentric. Which wasn't an exaggeration to say helped the company grow so big. So, the president wants to hold a competition for new product ideas. That's fine, but... And the president said? He's saying he'll choose the next president from among those who submit ideas for the competition. I was speechless. Is he serious? Seems so. And we want you, the ace of the product development department, to participate. But I've left the company. That's not a problem. I've convinced the president. Really? The director spent time convincing me. After being persuaded so much, I couldn't refuse. I decided to participate, partly to save the director's face. However, there's one condition. Please keep this a secret from my husband. I feel like it could complicate things. Understood. We'll handle it. Thank you. The deadline for the competition is in 2 months. Oh, and the theme is parent and child, just so you know. I decided to start brainstorming ideas as a way to distract myself. It was fun to think about products again. A feeling of fulfillment I hadn't experienced since working. The one thing I had to be careful about was not letting Greg find out. Before I knew it, it was evening. I'm home. I hadn't expected Greg to return so early. I hurriedly tidied up to greet him. You're back early. I had some good news today. Good news? There was an announcement for all employees. Apparently, the next president will be decided through this competition. Really? Greg seemed very motivated. But Greg, you're in sales, right? Can you do it? Who do you think I am? This will be easy. After all, it's a chance to become president. Even if Greg became president, I wouldn't want to work under such an arrogant person. However, there was a silver lining. Focusing on the competition made Greg's behavior towards me a bit softer. Of course, I couldn't let Greg beat me. Before wanting to become president, I had my pride. By the way, I'll be staying over at the company more starting tomorrow. It had been nearly a month since the competition started. It seemed Greg was feeling the pressure. But not every day, right? Greg didn't answer. Staying over at the company every day was unimaginable. Anyway, I want to focus. This house is too noisy, and I can't get anything done. Despite saying that, Greg was only fiddling with his smartphone. It seemed like he had already lost interest in whatever he was so passionate about before. It was probably just a fleeting effort. Greg would come home about twice a week to change his clothes. And each time, I could smell perfume on him. I had a faint suspicion of another woman, but he made no attempt to hide it. I thought to myself, if that's how it is, so be it. If he's having an affair, I could use that as a reason to divorce. That's what I started to consider. So, I decided to consult with Rachel. Kelly? What's up? I have something I want to discuss. I could hear rustling sounds over the phone. Are you with someone? Huh? Oh, it's fine. What's up? Lately, I've been suspecting Greg might be having an affair. I thought I heard laughter in the background. Are you sure it's not just your imagination? He hardly ever comes home. And it's not like he's staying at the company all the time. But isn't that alone not enough to be sure? But when he comes home, there's a scent of perfume. That never used to be the case. I see. Okay. I'm friends with Greg too, so I'll subtly ask him about it. Really? Is that okay? Of course. We're best friends, aren't we? Thank you. After hanging up the phone, I felt grateful to have a trustworthy best friend. Little did I know, that was a mistake, which I would realize a bit later. Leaving Greg's matter to Rachel, I focused on the competition. There were only 2 weeks left until the deadline. How's the competition going? I asked Greg when he came to pick up his change of clothes. Huh? Oh, it's almost there. Judging by his response, it seemed he hadn't done anything. I see. What? You seem like you want to say something. Nothing in particular. Then don't ask me pointless things. I decided to ignore Greg and focused on not submitting a half-hearted entry. I managed to submit just in time for the deadline and collapsed onto the sofa, relieved. I was satisfied with having completed the task, so the result was secondary. A month passed, and Greg started coming home more often. Are you free right now? It was a call from the director. Yes, I'm available. About the competition the other day, your proposal made it to the final selection. Really? Yes. We kept the submissions anonymous, but yours was outstanding. I was surprised but delighted, even though I hadn't expected much. For the next steps, we'll create a prototype and see how the customers respond. How many proposals are in the final selection? Including yours, there are 3. It's uncertain what will happen, but you're a worthy candidate for the next president. Me. Personally, I hope your proposal gets selected. Thank you so much. I'll contact you again with more details. I couldn't believe it. A mere housewife being considered for the president's position was beyond my wildest dreams. Of course, I decided to keep it a secret from Greg. Then, on a regular weekday, I plan to come home early today. Understood. It was unusual for him to say something like that. Welcome home. Greg didn't come home alone. Next to him was Rachel, whom I knew well. Hey. I have something important to discuss today. Important discussion? Greg and Rachel headed straight to the living room. Confused, I followed them in and sat opposite the two. What's this about? Can't you tell? Then, Greg pulled Rachel closer. That's when I understood. The presence of another woman I had sensed all this time was Rachel. So, there's more to the story, isn't there? Exactly. I'm leaving you to remarry Rachel. What? I let out a scream. I hadn't expected marriage to be on the table. Have you ever been useful since we got married? You haven't, right? I'm not working now, but... Right? But that's because you told me to become a housewife. Oh, come on, don't blame me. You could have refused, right? He continued to berate me. You're worthless. A useless person who can't earn a penny is not needed. So, you're divorcing me to remarry? Yes. We're getting a divorce. Honestly, I didn't mind the divorce. What worried me was our son, Max. What about Max? Max. You take care of him. His irresponsible words infuriated me. Sure, someone like you couldn't possibly take care of our precious son. You wouldn't even be able to properly raise him. What? Isn't that right? You've done nothing up until now. You, talking impudent. Greg clenched his fist. Then, Rachel, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Kelly, it's a shame, but give it up. You and Greg were never a match. Even though you introduced us? I realized it was a mistake. Greg is too good for you, you were in over your head. They said whatever they wanted. Until now, we were friends, but not anymore. Let me ask you, are you up to his standards? Of course. Unlike you, I'm fully prepared to support him as his wife. Is that all? What? Is that all you have? You're one to talk. Maybe you were something once. But now you're just a housewife who can't do anything. Maybe that's true. The conversation was so draining. But I was not someone to just accept my fate. Neither my husband nor Rachel knew anything. Rachel's right. You're a woman who's good for nothing now. So, we're divorcing? Yes. Get out as soon as you understand. This place isn't your home anymore. I took a deep breath. Are you sure? Yes. I've fallen in love with your best friend, and she's pregnant. Pregnant? I see. That's wonderful news. I wasn't surprised by anything I heard. I was just eager to leave this place. Then, let's get a divorce. Finally. You should have just said so from the beginning. Now, hurry up and leave. As they cuddled on the sofa, I began to pack my things, stuffing my bag with the essentials. Oh, by the way, the divorce papers are here. File them quickly. You're well prepared. I'm a capable man. I received the divorce papers. Just so you know, I'll be claiming child support, okay? I'll pay that much. You couldn't live without it, could you? Now go. Good luck, Kelly. Laughed at by the two, I left the house. My only place to turn was my parents' house, so I went straight there. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized, and I received the compensation. I have to work for Max's sake now. I wonder how the competition turned out. 3 days after returning to my parents' house, I was woken up by my mother. The phone has been ringing off the hook. Really? Thanks. Rubbing my sleepy eyes, I answered the phone. Hello? Hello, Kelly. Don't be surprised, but you've been appointed as the president. Is that so? And who's the president? What are you talking about? It's you. What? I accidentally dropped my smartphone in shock. Are you really serious? Of course. The feedback from the monitors has been excellent. And we're getting a lot of requests to launch the product soon. Me, president. I honestly couldn't grasp the reality of it. But this meant I could show Greg hell. I wondered what kind of face Greg would make when he found out I was the president. A month after the decision, I was on my way to the company to give my presidential inauguration speech. And in the lobby, I ran into Greg. "Why are you here?" "Long time no see, Mr. Incompetent Employee." "What did you say?" I said incompetent. "Didn't you hear?" "Huh? Who do you think you are?" Then, the director next to us warned Greg. "Who do you think you are? This person is the newly appointed president." "What are you talking about?" Exactly what the director said. "I've become the president." Greg's face turned pale. It was truly amusing. "After all this time you belittled me, who's useless now? If you don't want to get fired, watch how you speak." I tried to leave, ignoring Greg, when he begged for forgiveness. "Please. Forgive me." "Forgive? We're strangers now, aren't we?" "Move aside, you're in the way." Greg still stood in my path. "Just a minute. Let me talk." I glared at him and shook off his tempting hand. With that, Greg collapsed to the floor. "Wait. I was wrong. Let's start over. I'll break up with Rachel. I didn't have time to deal with such a man. Enough already. It's embarrassing in such a place. If you really want forgiveness, follow my instructions. Anything. I'll do anything. Then, you'll be going to our new overseas expansion. That's your assignment. Overseas. I had heard about this from the previous president. Greg's face lit up for a moment. But it wasn't going to be easy. "Just so you know, it's a place where even the water and gas aren't properly set up. No one could stop me now." "Huh? I'll issue the official orders later."
Bye.
With that, I headed to the president's office. Glancing back, I saw Greg slumped in the middle of the lobby. My heart had never felt so clear. I saw what happened in the lobby. Sorry for taking matters into my own hands. Don't worry about it. Sometimes a president needs to make ruthless decisions. Yes. I'm looking forward to your future endeavors. With that, I took my first step as president. Later on, Greg was issued an overseas transfer order. Of course, he was reluctant, but knowing that refusal would mean dismissal. He had no choice but to accept. This situation also affected Rachel. "Hello? What have you done?" I couldn't help it. "I'm the president, after all." "You're kidding me. If you're thinking of divorcing, now would be the time. Giving birth overseas could be unpredictable. I hope your company goes under." Rachel hung up unilaterally. I immediately set her number to reject calls. This way, she wouldn't be able to contact me. Then, on the day before Greg was due to leave for overseas, I called him to the president's office. "How are you feeling now?" "Terrible, obviously." "That's too bad. Don't think you'll get away with this. You seem to be under the wrong impression. I made my decision based on evaluating your abilities." Like I'd believe that. You don't have to believe it. Anyway, there's nothing more to talk about. You can go. The next day, Greg left for overseas. But I heard that Rachel had left a divorce petition and moved out. Although he's allowed to return home once a year. I wonder what kind of face he'll make when he does. The only regret is that I won't be able to see it. Greg's hell is likely to continue. The future sure is going to be interesting. Since then, I've continued to push forward every day as president. My current goal is to launch products that everyone wants to get their hands on.
The person I'm cheating with is pregnant with a boy. You're no longer needed, so get out.
It was my husband, Keith, who once vowed eternal love to me, who loudly declared this. At 32, I had been married to Keith for 7 years, dedicating my whole heart and soul for him. I left my job that I really liked to be with Keith when he was relocated for work. I provided him warm meals, a clean home, and a comfortable life, all while continuing to work. And yet, I endured the repeated pressures from his parents wanting to see their grandchild, continuing the mentally and physically demanding infertility treatments for 5 years. However, mocking my efforts, Keith was having an affair behind my back. This is unbelievable. I'll be demanding compensation from both of you. During the divorce discussions, both Keith and his affair partner, Tracy, said,
We can't pay compensation. Can we not do the compensation thing? Do you know how old Tracy is? She's 25. Unlike you, she's young and doesn't have financial power yet, so please forgive her. But well, probably because she's young, her eggs must have been fresh. After sleeping together a few times, she got pregnant immediately. It was really efficient.
With Keith saying this, Tracy, looking pleased, chimed in to mock me. That's right. Are you jealous that I got pregnant so easily? Faced with their unbelievable attitudes, my heart was shattered. But I couldn't back down here. No matter what you say, I'll be demanding compensation. The lawyer present explained the measures against them calmly. As we spoke, Tracy became increasingly irritated. Enough! I'm going to the restroom. She suddenly stood up with a visibly annoyed attitude, and at that moment, What's this? Looking at Tracy's lower half, I was speechless. From her white dress, a mysterious liquid dripped and fell. That was, Isn't this strange? You're supposed to be pregnant, right? But you're bleeding? My name is Eileen, 32 years old. I work as a temp at a certain trading company in LA. I met my husband Keith, who is 3 years older than me, at a mixer party and got married when I was 25. Keith is a hard-working salesman at a leading car manufacturer. From the moment we met, I was attracted to him from his interesting conversation and smart demeanor. Luckily, Keith was into me too, and we hit it off right away. Our journey to becoming husband and wife was a breeze. Soon after getting married, Keith was transferred to a regional area on company orders. Though it was a regional area, it was the largest city in the region, with convenient access including a train. Keith is now in charge of a bunch of dealerships in that city that just keeps growing in population. He asked me to quit my job and follow him. I hesitated because I was working at a major publishing house at the time. Having dreamt of becoming an editor since high school and studied literature in college, I was overjoyed when I was hired as an editor at the publishing house. But I also wanted to support Keith, who would be moving to a new place alone, and more importantly, I didn't want to be separated from him during our newlywed period. Also, becoming a mother had been one of my dreams since I was young. At that time, Keith's regional assignment was expected to last at least 5 years. Letting Keith go on his own for 5 years, I would be 30 when he returned. Back then, 30 seemed far off, and I wasn't confident about starting to try for a child at that age. So after much deliberation, I quit my job at the publishing house to follow him on his regional assignment.
I'm glad. If you're coming with me, I feel relieved. Focus on the household for a while and support my life. I'll be stressed in the new environment.
Keith told me this, so I didn't look for work at our new location and focused solely on our home and trying to conceive. However, we struggled to have a child. Out of desperation one night, I timidly suggested to Keith, maybe we should start considering fertility treatments. He glanced at me briefly and sharply said,
Sure, we can try treatment, but use your savings for it.
I was in shock when I first heard that, but there was no way to change it. In the end, I decided to use the savings I had accumulated from working at the publishing house before marriage to pay for visits to a fertility clinic. Keith's cooperation was essential for the fertility treatment. However, no matter how many times I spoke to him, he did not show understanding.
Why should I let some doctor I don't even know dictate our sex life? If two people truly love each other, shouldn't it be enough to conceive a child simply by being intimate whenever they desire? I think you're the reason why we can't seem to do what regular couples do.
Being in a new place with no friends, I believed in him and his words, but they ended up causing me a lot of pain. My period came again this month.
Why can all of my friends' wives get pregnant, but you can't? You've been so neurotic lately, it's bothering me too. Maybe you should shift your focus to something else?
Following Keith's suggestion, I stopped focusing solely on our home life and went back to work. It was a part-time office job at a local small business where my days were filled with making coffee and photocopying. The company was mostly older people, but mentally they were immature, starting to gossip as soon as someone left their seat. I thought about wanting to get pregnant quickly and leave such a company as soon as I joined. Even though I pleaded with Keith and somehow got him to cooperate, trying artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization did not change our situation, and I couldn't get pregnant. In the end, despite the treatment, 5 years passed since our marriage, and I turned 30 without having a child.
Eileen, we thought it was good that Keith got such a young and healthy wife, but now you're already 30. I know it's becoming more normal to have a baby when you're older, but don't you think it's a bit slow for someone who tied the knot at 25?
With Keith's income, you're only working part-time, right? You have so much free time, so why can't you show us even one grandchild? We're both working full-time.
Whenever we saw my in-laws, they'd throw shade and straight up insult us for not having any kids. Keith's parents are in their 50s and still in their prime working years. Both high school teachers, they hold a strong belief that becoming a proper adult means continuing to work while having children. So they utterly failed to understand why I, doing easy part-time office work, couldn't get pregnant. But during such times, Keith said nothing and acted as if he was unaware. Because of that, our rides home from his parents' house always ended in fights. I started thinking that maybe we were doomed. That was a year ago when I was 31. A bit later than expected, but Keith was finally able to return to LA.
Eileen, I've been promoted. It's thanks to you for supporting me in an unfamiliar place for 6 years.
Keith, that's great. I'll make something special to celebrate. It was a ray of hope that finally pierced the long-standing gloom in our household. From that day on, it was as if all our past troubles were a lie. We started talking a lot more, had meals at home, and went on dates more often, and even resumed our intimate life that had been put on hold for a while. Wow, what a lovely apartment. You get to live here?
Of course. I rented a nice apartment in LA because you've been through a lot.
Life in LA started off smoothly. I couldn't return to my previous work, but I joined a trading company as a temp, and besides simple office tasks, I was given responsibilities like working on the office newsletter. The people around me were nice, and I could work with more mental freedom than before. With Keith's promotion, he seemed to have a bit more time and began to cooperate more with our efforts to conceive. Maybe, just maybe, we might be able to get pregnant soon. I began to harbor this faint hope. However, about half a year ago, I started to feel suspicious about my husband's behavior. He said his workload had decreased due to delegating more to his subordinates and that his overtime had reduced. But suddenly he started coming home in taxis late at night and going on business trips over the weekend. Then one day, "Hey Eileen, have you noticed anything different about Keith lately? You see, a while back, Keith came into the store holding hands with a young woman." I heard this from the owner of a small supermarket near the next station. I haven't told Keith, but I sometimes shop at this supermarket, which is a bit far from the nearest station, because they have a wide variety of fresh produce and seasonal fruits are easy to come by. I couldn't believe her words, but considering my husband's recent behavior, it wasn't impossible. When I got home, I decided to try looking through Keith's study. Then, what's this? There was a notebook on the desk, blatantly placed with photos tucked inside. It was a selfie with a young woman. There were 2 photos where they were cheek to cheek, and another where the woman was kissing Keith on the cheek. I could feel the warmth draining from my hands. While my fingertips grew colder, my heart was pounding. I couldn't fully comprehend the betrayal by my husband of 7 years. "Hey, Keith, what's this photo?" When Keith came home that night, I immediately confronted him with the truth. Upon seeing the photo I presented, Keith was momentarily shocked, but quickly started grinning and said,
"Oh, you found out."
Then he uttered unbelievable words.
"The person I'm cheating with is pregnant with a boy. You're no longer needed, so get out."
"What are you talking about? What do you mean?"
"Exactly what I said. I'm telling you to leave. You're useless because you can't get pregnant."
I was shocked by his attitude and words. The shock of the affair was one thing, but to learn that he had also gotten her pregnant. In the words that mocked all my efforts. How is it fair that the one who shouldn't be able to have a baby with my husband gets pregnant without any trouble while I struggled for years? These thoughts swirled in my mind as I packed my bags in tears. This is just unforgivable. More than the sadness of being betrayed by the husband I loved, the feeling of I must absolutely punish my husband and his mistress swelled within me. From that day, I started preparing for divorce. 7 months later, I really wanted to have a discussion with Keith immediately, but he kept dodging it or would snap at me when I tried to talk, so it was difficult to have a proper conversation. After a few months, I decided to leave the house and stay at my parents'. We decided to discuss the divorce with a lawyer involved. Today, we will discuss the divorce between Keith and Eileen. A female lawyer consulted through my father's connections was very supportive and quickly set up a meeting with Keith, but it was unexpected that Tracy, the mistress, would also show up. The meeting started at 10 a.m. on a Saturday in a family restaurant, and Tracy arrived late. I was thinking of officially divorcing Keith and demanding compensation from both Keith and Tracy, but I didn't want to see the face of the pregnant mistress, so I really wished she hadn't come. Yet she arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes late. Sorry, it takes so much time to get ready when you're pregnant. Indeed, her belly was swollen. 8 months. Maybe she was close to her due date. I'll have the pancakes, a club sandwich, and maybe pasta too. Tracy ordered so much food. It was an amount that made me wonder if she had pregnancy cravings. However, based on the size of her belly, the morning sickness phase should be over. Now that we're all here, let's move on to the discussion about the compensation Eileen is demanding from Keith and Tracy. As the lawyer started, Tracy exaggeratedly exclaimed, What? You're demanding compensation from me, who's pregnant? Now that I have to spend more and more money as I'm about to give birth and raise a child? Are you serious? Just because you couldn't get pregnant for years, you're taking it out on me who got pregnant easily? I was stunned by her outrageous statements, yet Keith, sitting next to her, was tuning in with her.
Can we not do the compensation thing? Do you know how old Tracy is? She's 25. Unlike you, she's young and doesn't have financial power yet, so please forgive her. But well, probably because she's young, her eggs must have been fresh. After sleeping together a few times, she got pregnant immediately. It was really efficient.
I felt dizzy at his outrageous statement. Despite the various approaches my lawyer and I tried to take, Keith and Tracy kept up this tone, making no progress. Eventually, Tracy, perhaps frustrated, suddenly stood up and said, Enough! I'm going to the restroom. But at that moment, Hey, there's blood, isn't there? I stared at Tracy's lower half as she stood up. There was clearly something that looked like blood seeping through around the thigh area of her white dress. But she's supposed to be pregnant, so she shouldn't be having her period. Moreover, there was a significant amount of liquid, resembling water, dripping down, indicating something was wrong. What? What's happening? What is this? Tracy immediately panicked. The bleeding suggested something might have happened to the baby. Keith was also frantic, asking,
Tracy, are you okay?
In the end, what was supposed to be a discussion turned into my lawyer and I quickly calling for an ambulance and shoving Tracy and my husband into it. Why am I, the victim, helping the woman he cheated with? I returned to my parents' house, where I was staying, feeling incredibly dismayed. The next day, on Sunday morning, while having breakfast with my family, the doorbell rang immediately.
Eileen, good morning. Oh, mother-in-law, sorry to intrude. Or should I say, I'm home?
As my parents stood dumbfounded at the entrance, Keith walked confidently into the living room.
A funny story, but it turns out Tracy wasn't pregnant after all.
Keith began to explain with a laugh. He met Tracy a few months after he started working in LA. Tracy was a worker at a nightclub frequently visited by Keith's company. Tracy, who claimed to resemble a certain plus-size charisma model, was a bit plump but had glossy white skin, big round eyes, and a friendly personality, making her relatively popular there. One evening after dinner, Tracy leaned on Keith. Flattered by his promotion to LA, Keith was enticed by her soft skin and plump lips and ended up taking her to a hotel. That was the beginning. And then one night, the usually lively Tracy seemed unwell and repeatedly went to the bathroom to throw up.
Tracy, could it be you're pregnant?
At that time, Tracy didn't answer, but a few days later she confessed. I took a pregnancy test and it's positive. Keith was overjoyed at the news. Having moved back to LA, he was closer to his parents and the pressure from them to show us a grandchild had increased.
If the child is born, I'll just marry Tracy. My parents would be happy too,
he thought excitedly. His misconception and rush escalated further when he found out the child was supposedly a boy. However, Tracy wasn't actually pregnant. Tracy, 25, was looking for a way out of the nightlife. The day she ate too much and threw up, she had slept with Keith, who then mistakenly thought she was pregnant, thinking, I can use this to get married. She continued to eat and gain weight to pretend and be pregnant. The incident yesterday was due to stress urinary incontinence, caused by her obesity pressing on her bladder. The bleeding was because she was actually having her period.
Man, she was a real piece of work. I was so worried she might have had a miscarriage, but to think she wasn't even pregnant. Of course, I've completely broken it off with her.
As he disparaged the deceitful woman, he grabbed my hand, saying,
I misunderstood this time, and I'm sorry. Eileen, let's continue to work on fertility treatments together. We're a couple, after all. Let's forget about the divorce.
The words supposed to be spoken right before me somehow sounded distant. Why had I endured so much for a child with such a man? Looking back, I realized how foolish I was. Instead of getting angry, I just laughed it off.
Eileen, thank you. You're giving us another chance, aren't you?
He seemed to misunderstand my laughter as acceptance of withdrawing the divorce. Overcome with emotion, he attempted to embrace me. However, naturally, I didn't want to be touched by such a vile person and briskly brushed his hand away. For years, I endured being ridiculed and tormented by you and your parents, all while dreaming of having a child with you and bearing the painful infertility treatments. Can you even imagine the excruciating pain of uterosalpingography? You wouldn't understand how I felt every time an artificial insemination, which I begged you for and paid for with my savings, failed. You wouldn't even try to understand, would you? There's no way I could start over with someone like you. Crying, I turned to my worried parents by the door and asked them to kick him out.
Hey, Eileen, wait, listen to me.
My parents, along with my brother and sister who lived nearby and came over worried about me, dragged Keith out of my parents' house. But since that day, Keith has repeatedly stormed my parents' house, insisting on not getting a divorce. Even though I said, I won't talk without a lawyer, he wouldn't listen and would sit in front of the house for the morning of his day off. It wasn't just at my parents' house. He also ambushed me every day after work in front of the trading company where I am so grateful to work.
Hey, Eileen, forgive me.
Like a curse haunting me even when he wasn't physically there, driving me to the brink mentally. After much deliberation, I decided to contact someone. For you to reach out, especially when you refused to speak directly with us about your marriage? Paula and I met after a long time, and Paula was as harsh as ever. However, I felt she was much more reasonable than Keith, so I decided to tell her and Kyle everything. Proud as he is, Keith probably hadn't told his parents.
I thought my mistress was pregnant, so I initiated a divorce, but it turned out to be a lie, so I'm trying to call it off.
As expected, my in-laws were shocked. At first, my in-laws listened with furrowed brows, but gradually their expressions brightened. You want a divorce because you're fed up with Keith. It's regrettable, but honestly, it might not be bad news for us, said Paula.
Right. It's awkward to say, but this time Keith's partner is 25, right? We might actually prefer her over you, Eileen, who has had trouble conceiving.
Despite their wishful thinking, completely ignoring Tracy's lies, I was astounded. But if they could be of help, all the better. Leave it to us. We'll talk to Keith properly. With an unusually bright smile, they sent me off with a box of sweets, and I left my in-laws' house. A few days later,
What's going on, Eileen?
A call came from Keith, who sounded utterly distraught. Despite my insistence on communicating through a lawyer, he found various ways to contact me directly, including using company numbers, friends' smartphones, and even public phones, which was annoying. But this was for a smooth divorce. I tried to remain calm on the phone.
Dad and Mom suddenly started saying I should divorce you. They were all about you having kids just a while ago. What's with this sudden change? It's weird.
Keith was apparently at his parents' house. After listening for a while, the noise changed and someone else spoke on the phone. Sorry, Eileen. This child seems a bit distressed right now. He's not thinking straight. We've talked properly, but if you could speak with him too, he might understand.
He's been saying he hasn't been able to talk to you lately. Could you come over now? We prepare the divorce papers. All that's left is for you two to write your names.
Really? Thank you. I'm on my way now. I hurried into a taxi. According to Paula on the phone, Keith was upset but close to being persuaded. They told him that if he didn't divorce me and remarry Tracy, all of their inheritance would be left to his brother. It seems that the warning worked. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, Keith looked worn out and had already finished writing the divorce papers. Without even taking off my coat, I approached him as he was hunched over the table and confronted him with my true feelings. Hey, Keith, I really hate you now. I've come to detest you. At my words, Keith's shoulder twitched. Turning slowly, he gave me that cold look I have seen several times during our marriage. I feel the same. I can't stand you, who's just a defective woman who can't get pregnant. And then, in a fit of despair, he threw the divorce papers. Silently, I took the divorce papers, nodded to my in-laws, and left their house. I immediately went to submit the divorce application. Later, at a meeting rearranged with Keith, Tracy, and my lawyer, I reiterated my demand for compensation from both of them. That's absurd. I should be the one asking for compensation for wasting my time with a woman like you.
Paying compensation is really impossible. I've been suffering from mental anguish because of all the stress. I want compensation. As the two of them continued their loud protests, the lawyer, looking exasperated, sighed and informed them that if they continued to refuse paying the compensation, we would have to go to court. This seemed to quiet them down. They quickly agreed to pay the compensation and promised not to contact or approach me in any way. We also prepared a document outlining these terms in case anything happened in the future. Perhaps fearing a lawsuit, they both dutifully paid the agreed-upon compensation by the set deadline. Checking the transfer on my smartphone, I finally felt a sense of relief. Having overstayed my welcome at my parents' home, I decided to move out and start fresh with a new job. As the seasons changed and signs of spring appeared, I felt relieved to begin my new life quietly. However, occasionally, I would receive unsettling emails from Keith attempting reconciliation. No matter how many times I blocked him, he would contact me from new accounts. It seemed I would have to change not just my smartphone, but also my phone number and Messenger ID to completely cut him off. Despite the hassle of data transfer, I decided to change my phone. I forwarded all the emails Keith sent to all our mutual acquaintances, asking them not to share my contact information with him if he asked. Later, I learned that some of Keith's coworkers were among those I sent the emails to, which caused the story to spread within his company. Although his company was aware of our divorce, the revelation that he was sending strange emails to his ex-wife turned him into a laughingstock. Eventually, feeling out of place in the company he had always bragged about being one of America's leading companies, Keith resigned. Half a year into my new life, I received an unexpected call from Paula. Hey, Eileen, you've got to hear this.
Despite changing my phone and blocking Keith by every means possible, I had given my new contact information to Paula in case Keith caused any trouble. This was the first time she had actually reached out. Over the phone, Paula was sobbing. It turned out that, as per their scheme, Keith had quickly remarried Tracy after divorcing me, but after feeling unwelcome at his company, he quit his job and became a freeloader at his parents' house. Tracy, too, had quit her job in the nightlife industry around the time she pretended to be pregnant with Keith's child, expecting to be supported by him, and hadn't worked since. Now, two unemployed individuals were burdening my in-laws. Even if a grandchild was born, they admitted they couldn't possibly take care of them under these circumstances. After a month or two of neither seeking employment, my in-laws were considering evicting them when it was revealed that Tracy was actually pregnant. Oh, is that so? Well, that's good for you, isn't it? Everything turned out as you hoped. As the conversation seemed to drag on, I switched the call to speakerphone and leisurely sipped my coffee while nodding along. However, Paula exclaimed, "It's terrible!" Tracy continues to spend her days indoors fiddling with her smartphone as usual. Since she's pregnant, it's understandable that she can't be tasked with heavy housework, and I had been watching over her, but even the small chores she used to occasionally help with are now met with refusal when asked. When gently cautioned, she hysterically accuses,
"Are you bullying a pregnant woman?"
leading to a continual worsening of the household atmosphere despite the joy of the pregnancy. As for Keith, he uses supporting
Tracy as an excuse not to look for a full-time job, only willing to work short-time, part-time jobs despite once taking pride in his career. He claims he doesn't want to settle for a mediocre company. My in-laws continue to work full-time as teachers. They were supposed to be enjoying their retirement years, looking forward to seeing their grandchildren, but instead, they find themselves exhausted daily from taking care of these adult children, who suddenly refuse to work at all. But after talking to you, Eileen, I feel calmer. I think we've done you wrong. Since we caused you pain, it's only right that I take responsibility for my actions. After a lengthy conversation, she calmed down and thanked me before hanging up. That was the last time I heard from her. A year after divorcing Keith, I've been living peacefully in a new place, slowly healing from the scars of infidelity and divorce, and I've managed to restart my career in publishing, albeit at a much smaller company, enjoying fulfilling days. The sender was the lawyer who had helped me a year ago. Inside the envelope, along with a note saying, "This arrived at our office for you," was a smaller envelope. It contained a letter from Paula. The return address wasn't written. It detailed how my in-laws, Keith and Tracy, were living. Firstly, my in-laws no longer seemed to live in that house. After our phone call, Paula finally decided to kick Keith and Tracy out. They took back the keys, covered the windows from inside like barricades to prevent entry. However, it wasn't that simple.
Mom, are you abandoning me?
If anything happens to the baby because you left a pregnant woman out in the cold, you'll be cursed. As expected, their commotion at the front door led to disapproving glances from neighbors and noise complaints to the police. My in-laws, heartbroken, sold the cherished family home they had spoken so fondly of and fled to a distant place. The letter suggested they were living in the countryside, mentioning the air is fresh here and were growing vegetables. Though they've cut ties with Keith and Tracy, they've kept in touch through Keith's younger brother. Abandoned by his parents and cut off financially, Keith reluctantly rented an apartment nearby and got a full-time job in sales at a small but historic company that supplies screws to large corporations. But Keith, who once thrived as a salesman at a highly renowned car manufacturer, lacks motivation and has a poor attitude in his new role selling mere screws, causing the company difficulty. Tracy, on the other hand, despite safely giving birth, neglects both childcare and household duties, constantly on her smartphone, leaving their home in disarray and leading to constant arguments. One day, Tracy disappeared, taking all of Keith's savings with her, leaving only a signed divorce paper on the desk. The letter from Paula ended with, "I'm truly sorry for everything. Please live happily without any more involvement with my son." Despite our challenging relationship, her words offered me a slight sense of vindication. From what I occasionally hear from friends, Keith seems to be seeking information on reconciling with me. Luckily, everyone in my friend group knows about his bad reputation, so no one's helping him out. And he still has no clue where I am, so I can just enjoy my peaceful life. Reflecting on Paula's letter, I resolved to cherish my current life and move forward positively.
One day, while on a business trip abroad, my husband Tony sent me a message saying, "Let's get married." What's this? Apparently, he meant to send the message to his mistress, but accidentally sent it to me, his wife. Ever since he transferred to a new department, his suspicious behavior had increased. He suddenly started saying things like, "This lotion is supposed to be good," despite never being interested in beauty products before. I had a feeling something was off then. Tony, who does neither childcare nor household chores, seemed to be completely immersed in his affair. I thought, how foolish can he be? Then, the message was quickly retracted. Tony must have panicked and deleted it after realizing the mistake. I would have loved to see his face at that moment. Of course, I took a screenshot, so it doesn't matter that Tony deleted the message. I immediately called Tony. "I saw your message just now." No, that message was. Even over the phone, it was easy to tell he was flustered. "But maybe you meant to say let's divorce?" After that, he would come to know the truth. My name is Aileen Owen, I'm 34 years old. I've been married to Tony for 8 years. And we have a daughter in the 2nd grade named Brittany. Tony and I met through a friend's introduction. When I first saw a picture of Tony shown to me by a friend, I thought he was exactly my type and asked my friend to introduce us. He had thick eyebrows, a high nose, and a suntanned complexion. I've always liked people with what you might call a strong face. With a little push from my friend, Tony and I got the chance to dine together. The conversation went well, and we started dating immediately. Our relationship went smoothly, and about a year later, when I became pregnant, Tony said, "We're having a baby, shall we get married?" And I replied, "Of course. Please take care of me." That's how we ended up getting married. It wasn't a romantic proposal, but I was happy with Tony's proposal. Until I became pregnant, I worked as a web designer. But the morning sickness was so severe that I couldn't keep imposing on my colleagues and chose to resign. When I reported my resignation to my boss, he said, "It's truly sad to lose such a talented person like you, but your health comes first. If you want to come back after having the baby, feel free to contact me anytime." I felt truly blessed to have such supportive colleagues around me. Though I was sad, I prepared for childbirth. Eventually, I gave birth to a girl named Brittany. For a while, I didn't look for work and focused on being a full-time housewife, dedicating myself to household chores and childcare, but honestly, relying solely on my husband's salary was precarious. Therefore, when Brittany started kindergarten, I began part-time work at a supermarket. However, since I hadn't worked since Brittany's birth, I quickly became physically and mentally exhausted. Brittany was still young and I often had to pick her up from kindergarten because she was sick, which made me feel terribly guilty towards my colleagues. On top of that, Tony's neglect of household and childcare duties was tough. Wow, what's with this meat and potatoes? The carrots are too hard. I can't eat this. Sorry, but I'm going to throw it out. He seemed apologetic but casually threw out the meal I had made while busy. It was indeed harder than usual, but saying it was inedible was an exaggeration. With household chores, work, and childcare, I wish he would be a bit more forgiving. There were also times when he would come smiling and say, "The bathroom floor is a bit dirty. Could you clean it? Tomorrow is fine." If he noticed it, he should do it himself. That's how I feel about childcare too. When I asked my husband, which kindergarten should we choose for Brittany? A private one or the nearby public one, he replied, I don't know, Aileen, you decide." He leaves all childcare decisions to me. Tony doesn't see himself as a traditional, controlling husband at all. But he probably thinks he's being kind. Indeed, my husband speaks gently and isn't aggressive or rough. Both of us have rather calm personalities, so we never had any major fights while dating. That's why I didn't notice his hidden traditional traits until after we got married. The true nature of my husband gradually began to show after we started living together. The first time was when I cooked a meal for Tony. Wow, that was delicious. Aileen can really cook. Thanks for the meal. He said this with a satisfied expression and patted his belly, then just lay down on the couch, leaving his dishes on the table as if it was the most natural thing to do. I thought, can't he even carry his dishes to the kitchen? I remember being a bit shocked. Hey, at least carry your dishes. When I said this out of the blue, my husband looked surprised as well. From his expression, I realized he had never had to do anything at home. When I asked him to carry the dishes, he quickly got up and said, Oh, I'll carry them." Although he would act as instructed if reminded, I always have to prompt him. When I was returning to work, I advised him, "I'll be working too now, so you need to help more with childcare and housework." However, Tony seems to have already forgotten this. I'm home. He would come home, throw his jacket on the sofa, and strip off his socks and shirt as he walked. There were enough of Tony's discarded items to trail through the house. Even our kindergarten-age daughter Brittany is better at tidying up than him. It's a common sight to see her scolding him, saying, "Daddy, you shouldn't leave things here." "Sorry, Brittany," he would start tidying up immediately after being scolded by our daughter. Though it's hard to say if he's truly remorseful. Having such a husband return home always makes me feel as if another big child has come back. And honestly, it's exhausting. Still, by repeatedly reminding him, both our daughter and I try to get along as a family of 3. I'm disappointed by my husband's lack of cooperation. But I've come to think that maybe this is just what marriage is like. Time passed, and before I knew it, our daughter was in the 2nd grade. And both Tony and I were 34 years old. With kindergarten calls behind us and childcare settling down a bit, I started a side job in addition to part-time work. I wanted to work in web design, my previous job. So I searched online and managed to increase our income by a few $100s a month. I never doubted that our ordinary days would continue this way. However, one day, my husband reported, "I've been transferred starting April." Tony works in the accounting department at the headquarters of a plumbing manufacturer. His company is inherently prone to nationwide relocations. It's not unusual for department or branch transfers to be ordered. So, I knew such a day might come, but it was still a surprise when actually announced. What? Does the transfer mean we have to move? No. Actually, I'm still at the headquarters. But I've been transferred to the newly formed Business Development Department starting in April. Really? That's good to hear. You had me worried for a moment.
Yeah.
Me too. When the manager told me about the personnel order, I thought, finally. It's my turn to be relocated and was ready to go alone. Tony laughed. In any case, I thought we would continue to spend time together as before. But about half a year after the department transfer, my husband started coming home much later. "Working late again today, so I'll be home late," he would say before leaving for work. "You've been really busy lately." Well, yeah. The department is new, so we're still figuring things out, and it takes time. I see. Just don't overdo it.
Oh.
Thank you. I'm heading out. It's natural that it takes time to get things in order when starting something new. I thought it would settle down after a while. However, the overtime never ended. Moreover, recently, the business trips increased, and often. He doesn't even come home on weekends. As these days continued, our daughter began to feel lonely and started saying, "I haven't been able to play with Daddy recently. Come home earlier. Why isn't Daddy home these days?" It's tough on our young daughter. Thinking of our daughter feeling lonely made me realize that this couldn't continue. So, I said to Tony, "Hey, Brittany looks lonely every day. Can't you spend a little more time at home? Brittany is already in elementary school, right? She'll be fine on her own. She'll make friends and soon she won't be interested in me anymore." Sure, as Brittany reaches middle and high school, there will be many more distractions. Friends, and maybe a boyfriend, and she might spend less time at home. That's why it's important to cherish the time now when she wants to be with us. I felt frustrated by my husband's irresponsible remark. What kind of response is that? Can't you, as a father, think a little more about your daughter? She's saying she wants to be with you now. You haven't even taken her out to play recently. Think about her a little, will you? Seeing me turn red with anger, Tony let out a deep sigh and looked annoyed. What? I'm just working hard here. And yet you complain? It's not about that. What is it then? I'm tired. Don't nag me. You're just a part-timer, you wouldn't understand my position, right? If you have time to complain, Perfect your cooking and cleaning first. What? Are you saying I'm not doing well? No, not really. Anyway, I'm busy. I'm leaving now. My husband then slammed the door with force and left the house. Just a part-timer. So he thought of me that way. Maybe it's all over if I'm just considered just a part-timer. But being a part-timer doesn't mean one isn't busy, right? I work from 9 to 16, 5 days a week, and when I get home, I do my best with childcare and housekeeping. I don't think I'm slacking off, but to my husband, it seems like I am. Our marriage has only deteriorated since his transfer. There's also something else about my husband's behavior that concerns me. It's how suddenly he has become interested in his appearance. Before, my husband had no interest in beauty care, using cheap men's face wash, and hardly ever using lotion. Yet suddenly, he started saying, "This cleanser really gets the dirt off your skin." I was surprised that he even knew the word cleanser. He also started using a popular Korean lotion after his bath, which was another strange behavior. Hey, what's going on? You never cared about beauty before. Huh? Oh. Some young people at work told me about it. I'm in my 30s now, I have to start caring about my skin. At first, I believed what my husband said, but one day, an incident completely shattered my trust in him. That day, as usual, he came home after midnight saying he had been working late and immediately rushed to the bathroom, saying, "I'm tired, I'll take a bath first." While I felt sorry for him being so busy, the notification sound from his smartphone, which he usually takes to the dressing room but seemed to have forgotten in his rush, went off. I glanced at the phone screen out of curiosity. The screen was unlocked, so I could read the full message displayed. "Today was fun, thank you for paying for the meal and the hotel. When will we meet again?" What is this? The sender's name was Candace, clearly a message from a woman. And from the content, it's obvious that Candace was with my husband just before he hurried off to the bath. Was he trying to wash off any trace of having met someone? Unbelievable. Were all those overtime hours and business trips lies? Ignoring a daughter who wants to play. Saying, "I'm busy with work," and secretly meeting with a lover? The word divorce popped into my head. But, as Tony says, I'm just a part-timer. Even though I started a side job, it hasn't taken off yet. And I've only increased my income by a few $100s a month. Thinking about Brittany advancing to middle school, high school, and university, I'm not confident I can support her on my own. Should I confront Tony or pretend I haven't noticed, prioritizing our daughter's happiness first? While Tony was alone in the bath, I decided to keep quiet after thinking it through by myself. If I pretend I haven't noticed, Brittany can continue to spend time with her dad as before. After a while, my husband came out of the bath. He picked up his smartphone from the desk, glanced at me with a "that was close" expression, but when I pretended to be oblivious, he seemed relieved and quickly focused on his phone. He had finished reading the message from Candace, and he seemed quite pleased. I noticed his mouth slightly curve up. I was so filled with anger that I thought about stabbing him with a knife from behind. But for now, I have to hold back. Then he asked, "Prepare my overnight bag for a business trip this weekend." While packing his bag, I found a hotel loyalty card in his suit jacket pocket. And he began talking about beauty products he'd never cared about before. "This mask is really good. I'll take it with me for the overnight stay. Put it in the suitcase." My pretending not to notice seems to have made him overly confident that his affairs are undetected. Alone in the living room, I sighed deeply, and my daughter covered my mouth, saying, "Mom, don't sigh. Happiness will escape." What a kind child she is. I adore Brittany so much. I remind myself that I must endure for her sake. After that, Tony frequently used work as an excuse. At least bring in the laundry, I'd say, and he'd reply, I'm tired from work. Laundry is women's work, isn't it? Can you help Brittany with her homework? I'd ask. I used my brain too much at work already. I don't want to do that even at home. The most common was this. I'll be late today because of work. Oh, and next week, I'll be on a business trip because of work. He blames work for his inability to do household chores or be home. But basically, it means, I enjoy cheating so I won't do anything. While thinking this, I reached for his suit that he had left scattered around. That's when I noticed a piece of paper in the pocket of the suit. It was a divorce form. What is this? And Tony's signature was already on it. He wouldn't have signed it if he didn't plan to submit it. Should I really not get divorced even after all this? Now, he's moving for Candace. Until now, my love for Tony made me feel shocked and sad about his infidelity. But as things have gotten this bad, there's no love left for him. I think only of Brittany, that's all, but it's the most important thing. I'll keep this divorce form safe until the time comes. Until then, I've decided to start preparing for divorce. The first thing I need to do is work. I'll have to raise Brittany on my own from now on. Being a part-timer at the supermarket, the financial aspect is honestly the biggest hurdle. How can I become a full-time employee? Where should I work? Then I think of one person who might become a strong ally. That is my former boss. My former boss, Rachel, a single mother. She raised 2 children while working. She might understand my situation to some extent. Even after resigning, I met with her about twice a year, and she was always very fond of me. But since I quit my job to have a child, I wonder if she would still be willing to hire me now. Honestly, it was hard to ask, but I called her in desperation. Rachel, it's been a while. Oh, Aileen. Long time no see. Rachel picked up the phone right away. Actually, I've been going through some things. And it looks like I'm going to get a divorce. What? Why all of a sudden? You seemed so happy together. Could it be? Rachel seemed to sense something. Yes, that's exactly it. Tony has been having an affair. He wants a divorce. And so do I, but I have a daughter and I want to work as a full-time employee. Could you hire me again? Rachel listened sympathetically and nodded. Then, after a moment of silence as if she were thinking deeply, well, let me talk to the HR department. Honestly, the company has been short-staffed and struggling. And someone with your immediate skills would be a blessing. Really? Thank you so much. I breathed a sigh of relief. But you have gathered solid evidence of the affair, right? Evidence of the affair? I've taken screenshots of his hotel loyalty card and line messages, but that's about it. That's not enough. You need more solid evidence to really make him suffer. I'll help you with that, as someone who's been through it. Experienced. As Rachel continued, it turned out that she had become a single mother because of her husband's infidelity too. She had hired a lawyer and gathered ample evidence for compensation. So the divorce proceedings went smoothly, and she received both child support and compensation. You need evidence to have an advantage in the divorce. Just messages aren't enough. You need multiple photos of him entering and exiting hotels or the mistress's house. Do I need that much? I had no idea. I was stunned. I didn't realize gathering evidence was so challenging. Don't worry. I'll introduce you to the private detective agency I used. I'll come with you, let's set a date. Rachel arranged for us to go to the detective agency the following week. And as promised, She came with me. She was as reliable as when we worked together. 6 months have passed. Yet, Tony hasn't brought up divorce with me. That was actually to my advantage. I am grateful that he gave me time to prepare for the divorce. My kindness will be to knock him down to the bottom. After all, this is all your fault for having an affair. Don't hate me for it? Thanks to Rachel's support over these 6 months, I was rehired as a full-time employee. The company appreciates my experience in web design and offered me a very favorable salary. And importantly, we have gathered plenty of solid evidence. When I hired the detective agency to collect evidence, they quickly got what we needed. Since Tony was getting cocky thinking I wouldn't catch on, they caught him in the act when he said he was working late or going on a business trip. What a fool. Unaware that his wife was preparing for divorce, Tony came home today, scattered his clothes around, and carelessly said, "Hey, I'm home. Get dinner ready." Before, such remarks irritated me, but now it's different. I smiled sweetly and said, "Today's dinner is your favorite, meatloaf." It won't be long before I say goodbye to such a big child. Strangely, when I thought about it, I felt nothing. Just when I was planning to take action, Tony told me, "I'm going on a business trip abroad starting tomorrow. I won't be back for 4 days." I thought, oh, so he's finally talking about a business trip abroad. I was impressed by Tony's bold move, so I decided to feign doubt and asked, "Does your company even have business trips abroad? I've never heard any of your colleagues mention going on one before." I wanted to see his troubled face. It just started this year. Looks like I'll be the first one to experience it." Tony replied with a forced laugh. "Oh? Are you going alone? Or is someone going with you?" Well, I'm going with a colleague." "Why do you ask all of a sudden? You never ask these things." Tony was clearly flustered. It was obvious he was hiding something. "Just curious. It's a rare opportunity abroad, so have fun." I smirked and left the room. I thought, I've decided. I'll carry out my plan while he's away on his business trip. I made up my mind. On the day of Tony's departure, he seemed unusually excited. Normally, he would have me prepare everything he needed to take, but this time he said, "I'll prepare it myself." I was certain he was probably planning to take a fake business trip with Candace. I thought, this is the perfect opportunity. Today, I will definitely divorce this man. About 2 hours after Tony left the house, the doorbell rang. The movers had arrived. When Tony mentioned his business trip, I targeted this day to arrange everything in advance. "Please take all these items to this address." I plan to move all mine and Brittany's belongings to my parents' house. I had already informed my parents about everything. When I told them I was getting divorced and had been cheated on, they were quite shocked at first. But when they learned that I had changed jobs and hired a detective agency to gather evidence, they seemed to understand my determination. My father said, "If that's the case, come live with us. We'll take care of Brittany." Fortunately, my parents' house was not far from mine, so Brittany wouldn't need to change schools. I decided to take up their offer and live with them. Of course, I had already informed them about moving today. While I was discussing with the movers and preparing, Brittany was being looked after by my parents. Our belongings were relatively few and the move was completed in 1 day. The next day, I started to unpack and settle into my parents' house. Brittany was happy to be living with her grandparents, saying, "I'm looking forward to this. Girls are amazing." Without me having to say anything, she would tidy up on her own and help clean the room. Every day, I'm surprised by how much she has grown. I had already told Brittany that we would be apart from Daddy. Will you be okay without Daddy? Won't you feel lonely? When I asked her, she said, not at all. I don't like Daddy because he doesn't love me. No matter how much I ask, he never wants to be with me. What kind of father makes his daughter say such things? It boils my blood. Brittany's words only strengthened my resolve to divorce. As I finished all the preparations, the day Tony was supposed to return approached. What time are you coming back? I texted Tony and waited for a reply. However, even after a few hours, there was no response. I thought it was strange and waited patiently until I noticed the notification sound on my smartphone. Is it Tony? I thought, as I pulled out my phone and looked at the screen. There was a shocking message displayed. It made me exclaim aloud, what the? It was a message from Tony saying, it was really fun. This trip to Hawaii was like a honeymoon for us. Let's get married after things settle down. Does he mean we'll get a divorce once things settle down? How stupid can this man be? To mistakenly send such a message to me, the worst person he could possibly send it to, instead of his intended recipient. It's so ridiculous that I can't help but laugh. Soon after, the message was retracted. Tony must have panicked and deleted it when he realized his mistake. I would have loved to see his face at that moment. Of course, I took a screenshot, so it doesn't matter that Tony deleted the message. I immediately called Tony. Hey, Tony. I received a message from you proposing marriage. What does that mean exactly? I asked. Tony was clearly flustered and stammered, no. You saw that. Yes, I saw it clearly. But I'm curious. It's strange, isn't it? Perhaps you meant to say, let's get divorced, instead of a let's get married? What? How was your affair trip? Did you enjoy your time lying to your wife and daughter and spending time with your mistress? That is, well. Tony stumbled over his words, clearly distressed by my questioning. At this point, the answer was clear. Candace was indeed his mistress. And she was the one Tony was always interacting with on his phone. So, you want a divorce, right? Wait. Let's talk about this properly. There's nothing to talk about. We're already divorced, after all. What? Actually, on the day Tony left for his so-called business trip, which was actually an affair trip, I had already filed for divorce at the city hall. Thanks to Tony having already signed the papers, the divorce was processed immediately. You're lying. You can't just divorce me like that. Oh, but you prepared it, didn't you? It was in your suit pocket. The completed divorce form. Even over the phone, I could hear Tony starting to panic. You didn't actually submit that divorce form, did you? Yes, I did, just as you wished. That was not. I mean, let's talk when I get back, okay? I told you, there's nothing to talk about. With that, I hung up without waiting for his reply. After that, I received numerous messages from him begging to reconsider, claiming the divorce form was just to show his girlfriend, and that he was momentarily possessed by an evil spirit. I ignored all of them. Hours later, Tony called again, probably having just arrived home. Despite my reluctance, due to his persistent calling, I finally answered the phone. What? Is there something you still need? Hey. What is this? Why are yours and Brittany's things gone? And this picture? Didn't I tell you we're divorced? We can't live together anymore, can we? And did you like the picture? It turned out quite nice, I laughed mockingly. In fact, I had framed a photo of Tony and Candace walking arm in arm and placed it in the living room. What about Brittany? She must be upset about being away from me. She kept calling for her daddy. I scoffed. Brittany said she hates you, Tony. You're the one who's been neglecting her feelings, aren't you? That's a lie. And you're just a part-timer. How are you going to raise her on your own? Oh, Tony, I'm working full-time now and my salary is quite good, so don't worry. Since when? I haven't heard anything about that. There was no need to tell you since you're never home. I have all the evidence I need. Make sure you pay compensation and child support. And please say hello to Candace for me. With that, I ended the call again. Despite further calls, I blocked his number and set his messages to be rejected. Later, thanks to Rachel's recommended lawyer, Tony was ordered to pay $15,000 in compensation to me and $8,000 in damages to Candace. Moreover, a legal arrangement was made for Tony to transfer $500 each month for child support until Brittany turns 20. If Tony fails to pay, the lawyer has assured that they will enforce collection or seizure. Candace, faced with a claim for damages, and her parents finding out about her affair with a married man, was advised to break up with Tony, which she did. It seems her feelings weren't strong enough to continue the relationship despite everything. Internally, I thought, serves you right. As for me, my work has been going very well. What started as a side job has now become too busy to handle, because my main job has become so demanding. Returning to a workplace where systems and facilities had changed considerably was initially shocking. But I've managed to keep up and am giving it my all. For the sake of my beloved Brittany, for Rachel who supported me, and for my parents who have been my backbone. I am determined to succeed in my job and repay their kindness.
It's only natural to choose a younger woman over an old hag like you, right? If I'm an old hag, then you're an old geezer. I wanted to retort but held back, glaring at my grinning husband instead. Indeed, I am older than my husband and the oldest in this household. The younger woman my husband pointed out is almost half my age. Yes, the woman my husband had an affair with is none other than our daughter-in-law. The said daughter-in-law, being called a younger woman, my husband pointed out is almost half my age. After all, don't you feel sorry for her? For a woman to marry a man like this, it's no wonder she'd want to cheat once or twice. What my husband dismissively referred to was our son. Such a heartless comment about our child who had just received a terminal diagnosis. I was about to shout in anger when a calm voice spoke up from behind me. Hey, Mom. Our son, caught in the middle, had a surprisingly calm face. But seeing the uncontainable anger in his eyes, I involuntarily held my breath. There's something I need your help with. That's okay, right? My name is Courtney. I'm a 55-year-old office worker. My husband, Robert, is younger at 51. We met in a mountain climbing club 30 years ago. The age range in the mountain climbing club I belonged to was from the 20s to the 60s, with a fairly equal number of men and women. Mountain climbing is great, isn't it? Courtney, why did you start mountain climbing? Robert was personable and cheerful, making him easy to talk to even at first meeting. I started because of my father's influence. Influenced by your dad, that's nice. What about you, Robert? Why did you start mountain climbing? If there's a mountain, a man just wants to climb it. What's that supposed to mean? Thanks to his indiscriminately friendly nature, we quickly became friends. How old are you, Courtney? Me? I'm 26. Older. Older women are wonderful, aren't they? Really? But if I'm older, that means you're younger, right? How old are you? I'm 22. So young. Only a 4-year difference. That's quite a big difference, actually. Is it? Talking to him was so much fun. And on that very day we met, he proposed to me at the mountain summit. Actually, I fell in love with you at first sight. I had already given my heart to him during our climb, so I accepted his relationship proposal right there. From the day we first met, we became a couple. With mountain climbing as our common hobby, we never ran out of things to talk about. While enjoying dates as lovers, we also participated in the mountain climbing club's activities together. A year into our relationship, I discovered I was pregnant. This led to me and him getting married. After getting married, I realized my husband didn't have much savings. Although he was working hard as a company employee, he was still young at 23, and his salary was less than mine. Rather than not having savings, it seemed more like he had the kind of personality that spent his salary as soon as he got it. I was on maternity leave by the time I entered my 9th month of pregnancy. While on leave, I could receive a salary from my company, but it was less than what I earned while working. Because of this, I greatly relied on my parents, who lived nearby, for financial support. Not only did my parents help financially, but they also provided various other forms of support, allowing me to safely give birth to a boy. We named our son Sean and raised him with care. Before Sean turned 1, I returned to work. Raising a child while balancing work was challenging, but we supported our lives through dual income. Sean grew up healthy and strong. Time flew by, and before we knew it, Sean was 24. After graduating from college, our son moved out and seemed to be working hard on his own. He contacted us saying, "I have something important to discuss with you and Dad, so please keep next Sunday free." And today is that Sunday. Both my husband and I were restless. When the doorbell rang and we opened the front door, there stood Sean and a woman of his age beside him. She was a demure-looking lady who seemed like she would suit a kimono well, quite adorable. "Dad, Mom, let me introduce you. This is Kim, whom I am currently dating. Nice to meet you. My name is Kim." Kim bowed her head slightly. "She's a lovely young lady." Hearing this, my son smiled happily. "I'm thinking of marrying Kim." Sean declared that, standing together with Kim. Kim was apparently one of Sean's subordinates. Receiving the news that my son was getting married, I savored the happiness deeply. Oh, Sean is at the age to get married now. What's with that, Mom? Getting all sentimental. So, what do you like about Kim? I might have been too forward, but I asked directly. She's usually quiet, but I like that she can speak her mind when it matters. She doesn't hesitate to say what she wants, even to her boss, me. That's because Sean. Let's not start with the criticisms, okay? Everyone burst into laughter. Seeing their harmonious atmosphere made me feel incredibly happy. After Sean and his fiancée, Kim, left, I spoke to my husband. She was a lovely lady, wasn't she? Yeah, very adorable. You keep saying adorable, adorable. I sighed in response. Do I still look young? You do look younger than your age, but don't take Kim's words too seriously. They're just being polite. I'm already 52, and my husband is turning 48, but he seemed very pleased with Kim's words. You look like a cool father-in-law. 2 years after the marriage proposal, our son, now 26, and his wife came over. Actually, we want to build our own home, so we're saving up for it. Could we possibly live with you to help with that? Live with us? Well, I don't mind. But you have Kim's consent, right? Our house had enough room for the son and his wife to stay. However, I couldn't imagine anyone would be happy about living with their in-laws after just 2 years of marriage. When I asked, it turned out that the idea of living together came from my daughter-in-law. When the 4 of us discussed it later, my daughter-in-law seemed genuinely happy and looking forward to it. I wondered if this was common nowadays, then looked at my husband. What about you? What do you think? My husband's face lit up at the mention of the topic. Well, if we lived together, we could see our grandchild right away if one were to be born, right? Seeing my husband agree so readily, I found myself nodding in agreement. I understood it was a decision for them to make, but I too was looking forward to the birth of a grandchild. Thus, with everyone's wishes, we started our life living together with our son and his wife. I work, so I am not home much. Kim, having resigned from her job upon marriage in a practice known as retirement upon marriage, is now a full-time homemaker. Therefore, she is at home all day. I am very grateful to her for taking care of things like receiving deliveries, doing the laundry, and preparing meals. However, the fact that we spend little time together means we avoid unnecessary conflicts, and life has been smooth sailing. But this lifestyle did not last long. About a year after we started living together, our son was diagnosed with a disease that was weakening his immune system. No one spoke during dinner on the day his illness was discovered. I tried to accept it somehow, but I couldn't sleep at all that night, imagining the worst-case scenario. After the discovery of our son's illness, Kim, who was a homemaker, started working part-time to earn money for his treatment and began to be out often. As our son's condition worsened, he eventually needed a wheelchair for mobility. We decided to support our son as a family, relying on a helper during the day. One evening, while doing the dishes, Kim had a request. I have a sudden shift at work tomorrow. But tomorrow is the day to take Sean to the hospital. I tried to say no because it was impossible, but they insisted I must come in. Could you please take Sean to the hospital tomorrow? Of course. Thank you so much. Mom's taking me tomorrow? Hearing my son's frail voice from the living room connected to the kitchen, I rushed over to listen to him. After the hospital, can we go shopping? There's something I want to buy. Of course, we can. Then, why don't you two go have some coffee after shopping? There's that new pancake place, right? My husband suggested while fiddling with his smartphone next to my son. Sure, let's have pancakes for lunch then. The next day, I pushed my son's wheelchair and we went to the hospital. Perhaps because it was a Monday, the hospital was quite crowded, and my son seemed tired from the throngs of people. So, we decided to change our plans for shopping and head home early. In the car, my son told me he wanted to buy a present for Kim as a thank you for always supporting him. But it's pathetic, isn't it? Wanting to buy something and not being able to go by myself. And in the end, I couldn't buy it today. Hearing my son mutter softly in the car made my throat tight. Perhaps it's the thought that counts. Sean remained silent. I tried to keep my voice as cheerful as possible without sounding forced. How about we have pasta for lunch? We arrived home much earlier than planned. And there was Kim's car, parked when she was supposed to be at her part-time job. Oh. I wonder if Kim's shift was cancelled. As I thought this and got out of the car, passing by Kim's car parked in front of the house, I saw something horrifying. Inside Kim's car were Kim and my husband, who was supposed to be at work. Sean, could you go inside first? I encouraged Sean, in his wheelchair, to enter the house on his own. After making sure my son had entered the house, I caught my husband's eye through the window. He was crouched down, fiddling with something outside of view. Curious, I peeked into my daughter-in-law's car and saw my husband trying to fasten his belt in the cramped space of the car. The car seat was reclined, and my husband was on top of Kim, in close contact. Clearly, this was not a situation befitting a father-in-law and daughter-in-law. Knock knock. I tapped on the car window and told them to come inside. So, what exactly were the two of you doing in that cramped car? I confronted my husband and daughter-in-law in a space separated by a door from the room where my son was resting. It was clear to anyone that there was no excusing their situation. Yet, neither of them seemed flustered. Waiting silently for one of them to speak, my husband snorted. As you saw. There's only one thing a man and a woman do in a cramped car, right? My husband responded defiantly. I had never seen such an ugly expression on his face before. His attitude and words made my blood boil instantly. A man and a woman. You are in the positions of father-in-law and daughter-in-law. And there's a significant age gap, right? Age is just a number. It's all about appearance. Right now, I look younger, don't I? Healthier than sick Sean, with his pale face. You've been thinking like that. I was just helping Kim out, instead of our son who can't move freely. Ah, Kim is so diligent. She was secretly crying knowing our son's life is short. I just spoke to her, that's all. You just took advantage of the situation. And Kim, are you okay with this? I questioned my daughter-in-law, who was standing next to my husband with a displeased expression. I want to live a fun life too. I hate having to juggle part-time work, hospital visits, and housework every day. Why do I have to suffer this much when other people are still enjoying their lives? Right, Kim is still young. It's pitiful for her to spend her days caring for a sick person and working. You stay out of this. I shouted loudly to stop my husband. Unlike Sean, Robert has money and is healthy, so he can fulfill various desires. I've decided to switch to Robert. I couldn't stand looking at the two of them, calling each other Robert and Kim. So, you two have been involved since Sean fell ill? That's right. My husband said calmly. Is everything you've just said true? The living room door opened, and there was my son, managing his wheelchair with trembling arms, looking at them angrily. You mean all of this is true? While I was suffering from my illness, you two were getting along just fine? My son confronted them loudly. But considering his weakened state, even raising his voice must have been tough. I went to my son's side and placed my hand on his back. Sean has no right to yell at me. The seemingly gentle daughter-in-law raised her voice before continuing. I thought I was marrying into a happy life. Despite retiring upon marriage, I ended up having to work again, and my days were reduced to a cycle of hospital visits, part-time work, and house chores. I couldn't even enjoy shopping or traveling. I've been suppressing my desires, taking care of you all this time. That's right, Sean. You should be thanking Kim first. I noticed my son clench his fists tightly and couldn't help but yell at my daughter-in-law in frustration. What kind of attitude is that? We have a helper during the day, and your father and I mainly take care of you at night. And you say you had to work, but we've been providing most of the living expenses. The treatment costs were covered by Sean's insurance. She spoke as if she had sacrificed everything, but the reality was different. She hardly took care of my son. She was working during the day, and I was the one primarily taking care of him at night. We had agreed to equally share household chores after she started working, but I ended up doing most of it because she said her new job was tough. I provided for the living expenses and took care of everything, wondering if I was just being used as a caretaker. Despite everything, I had cooperated because I understood what it was like for her, having a husband who fell seriously ill at a young age. But to be treated like this was unforgivable. However, my husband seemed completely oblivious to my feelings. Seems like Kim had a lot of grievances. About various things. He said with a vile smile on his face. With your condition, you couldn't satisfy your wife, could you? A husband who doesn't have money, in fact, costs money because of his illness. It's only natural for her to leave a husband who only causes her trouble. That's right. Don't make me out to be the bad guy. The bad one is you, for getting sick. I couldn't contain my anger towards a wife who didn't provide care, didn't contribute to the household, and a husband who could stoop so low as to insult his son struggling with illness. Enough from both of you. Why does my son, who was even thinking of buying his wife a gift after the hospital visit, have to endure this? I was seething with rage. We're getting a divorce. I said that to my husband. I want a divorce from you. That works out for me. I'm happier being with someone younger and cuter than an older woman anyway. I'll give you a divorce. He wrapped his arm around my daughter-in-law, smirking. Kim, I want you to divorce me too. My son said to his wife with a trembling voice, expecting her to agree. No. She answered immediately. If I divorce you now, I won't get any inheritance, right? After all the hardships I've endured, I think I deserve your inheritance. What are you talking about? Please, just divorce my son and do whatever you want with that man. It's as if she's wishing for my son to leave this world sooner by talking about inheritance while he's still alive. No, but I'll be leaving this house. When you die, I'll come for the inheritance. Saying this, my husband and daughter-in-law quickly packed their things and left. Standing dumbfounded next to me, my son showed his resolve. Mom, I need your help with something. His voice was firm. I'll make sure those two regret what they've done. I'll never forgive them. I could see a quiet rage burning within him. Unlike me, his calmness was admirable. With what? Do you have a plan? Yes. I'll support you in whatever way I can. Then, will you listen to my plan? Of course. My son and I devised a plan. Eventually, only my husband returned home, holding a divorce paper, and we quickly finalized our divorce. As for my daughter-in-law, no matter how many times my son and I tried to contact her, there was no response. 5 years later, my son passed away. I still can't get over the wish that he could have lived longer than me. Many people, including medical professionals and colleagues from the company he worked for before his illness, gathered at my son's funeral. Among the many attendees, I spotted two faces I had never forgotten in the last 5 years. My ex-husband and my son's wife. Oh, you came. Approaching them, I noticed both my ex-husband and daughter-in-law looked considerably shabby. My husband, who once boasted that appearance was everything, looked older than his actual age with sunken cheeks, and my daughter-in-law had lost her initial cuteness, her face now harsh and worn. Both were dressed in tattered clothes. As soon as they saw me, their eyes lit up like a cat that found its prey. I'm here for the inheritance, she said to me as if it were the most natural thing. I deserve the inheritance for all the care I've given him. It's only right. That's right. There should be an inheritance. You're not planning to keep it all to yourself, are you? A child's property is supposed to be inherited by the parents. Even if we divorced because of infidelity, the parent-child bond can't be broken. I'm also entitled to Sean's inheritance. Hurry up and give us the money. This man has had no savings, and these past 5 years have been very tough. But I endured it, thinking it was just until I received Sean's inheritance. You'll forgive me for the affair 5 years ago, right? The change in my daughter-in-law elicited a bitter laugh. She used to sweetly call him Robert, and now it's just this man. The only reason my ex-husband had money to spend freely was that I gave him an allowance. I earned more than my husband from the beginning of our marriage, so I had been giving him a monthly allowance. Restricting his spending too much could have led to him hiding his salary or not contributing to household expenses, which would have been disastrous. So from the beginning, giving him a bit extra as an allowance was just to avoid wasteful spending or hiding money. By saving like that, I protected our finances, but divorcing me to marry a younger woman wouldn't change his nature. He's still not good at saving money and spends whatever he has. The two of them might have left with great fanfare, but their life must have become much harder. It's like they're real hyenas, finding out about my son's death from who knows where. Come on, give us the inheritance. There must be some savings for a home, right? If you've used it up, I won't forgive you. I'll take that along with the inheritance. They came at me demanding, but I stood firm and said sharply, there's no inheritance for you to receive. What do you mean? This is what I mean. I showed them a document. As soon as they saw it, their faces turned pale. Give it here. She snatched the document from me, her shoulders trembling. A donation certificate. She slowly read the words on the document aloud. That's right. Recently, my son, realizing his time was near, donated his entire fortune to a medical research institution. This is the certificate of that donation. So, there's not a single penny left of the inheritance you came for. That can't be. What was I enduring these 5 years for? It seemed my daughter-in-law had grown tired of my ex-husband long ago and was only with him for the sake of my son's inheritance. Then give me money. I was the one taking care of your son, taking him to the hospital, working part-time. I sacrificed myself for him, so I deserve some money. She was so desperate for money that she demanded it from me. Since you both vanished without a trace, there's something I couldn't inform you about. So, let me tell you now, right here. What is it? I prepared to reveal another truth to my son's wife, who was glaring at me. You are no longer Sean's wife. The divorce has been finalized long ago. So, you don't have any right to Sean's inheritance to begin with. What? That's a lie, right? Actually, on the day their affair came to light, my son had been recording their conversation from behind the door where I was interrogating the two of them. After they left the house, my son and I took that recording to a lawyer. When we expressed a desire to divorce his wife who had become unreachable due to infidelity, we were advised about going to court. We proceeded with a public notification, and the trial began in her absence. My son's divorce was quickly granted. So, you see, you're no longer pretending to be Sean's wife because you're now a complete stranger. A stranger. Such a foolish girl, really. Living with some other man for 5 years. If my ex-husband truly loved my daughter-in-law, he might have encouraged her to divorce and remarry him at some point. But in the end, he just wanted a young woman who would give herself to him and take care of him. Both of them were just waiting for Sean to pass away, doing nothing to change their own situation. That's why my daughter-in-law didn't realize she was now single, and my ex-husband didn't want to let go of a young wife who looked after him. I sighed deeply before turning back to face them. Furthermore, I've filed for damages against both of you for your adultery. Rest assured, you'll be paying the compensation. Compensation? You can't be serious. We're already in debt as it is. We thought the inheritance would clear that debt, but there's no way we can pay compensation now. Exactly. Why are you demanding compensation now of all times? I had always intended to claim compensation. You two just went missing before I could do it. Now that you've returned, of course, I'm going to demand it. By the way, I've recorded everything you've said since you arrived. Trying to deny the affair now won't work. At this, they seemed furious, both attempting to lunge at me. Hey! What are you doing? However, medical staff and company employees present restrained them, so I was unharmed. Are you okay? Yes, thank you. While being restrained, my ex-husband and my son's ex-wife kept shouting, "Give us the money." Soon after, the sound of a police car approached, and officers arrived. The two of you are suspected of fraud. We'll need you to come with us to the station. It seems someone at my son's funeral must have called the police. The two were taken away by the police. Later, I heard from the police that my ex-husband and my son's ex-wife had turned to fraud to repay their debts. Further investigation revealed more crimes, and they would be spending some time behind bars. It was surprising they had stooped to fraud. The two who had hurled insults at my son were now facing social consequences. My son's ex-wife had wasted her 20s, a prime time of her life, on such follies. While I sympathized with her for my husband becoming seriously ill at a young age, everything else was their own doing. I had no more thoughts for the two who had even engaged in criminal activities. I don't know the extent of their debts, but they might be chased by repayments till their deaths. I might never receive the compensation I demanded, but I'm past caring. If they're suffering that much, I wish them to endure it far away from me. Years have passed since my son's death, but I still receive thank you letters from patients every day, grateful for his donation. Reading these letters, I'm proud of my son's decision. My son's decision to wait for his death to benefit others ensured that not a single penny went to those two, and his contributions are still helping many. When he told me about his plan, my son said, "I'm sorry I can't leave anything for you, Mom." But even years after his funeral, I continue to receive letters of gratitude towards my son. His choice continues to be a source of life for others. What a proud thing it is. I was fortunate to have such a wonderful son. I chose to keep working even after retirement. My job is fulfilling and enjoyable. I'm truly grateful I acquired professional qualifications and knowledge when I was younger. Back then, I was desperate to raise my son, working hard to increase my salary through studying for qualifications. I have enough assets to live on my own, and I owe it all to my son. And I've continued my hobby of mountain climbing. Sean, thank you. I'll make sure to enjoy the rest of my life to the fullest, so wait for me there. I spoke to my son, smiling at his photo on the altar.
If you have your ovaries removed, you can't have children, right? I don't need you anymore, so can you divorce me? The paper Matt thrust in front of me was a divorce form. Wait, what are you talking about? I won't forgive you if you're joking in this situation. A few days ago, I was rushed to the hospital with sudden abdominal pain. The tests showed a possibility of ovarian cancer, and I was admitted for surgery the next day. This is no joke. I've been putting up with this until now. No, living with my in-laws and their mistreatment. I was the one who had been enduring. Yet, why am I the one being presented with a divorce form? Especially when I'm about to have surgery tomorrow. Anger, sadness, despair. My emotions were a mess, and I covered my face. Then, to add insult to injury, I heard my in-laws' voices. A useless woman who can't bear children should quietly step aside. Clinging to a younger husband at your age is disgraceful. These 3 years have been a waste for Matt. Please disappear from our sight soon. Their words tore my heart to shreds. I bit my lip to stop myself from crying and, with great effort, held my shaking right hand with my left as I scribbled my name. Good, now you and I are strangers. Saying this, Matt put the divorce form in his inner pocket. As he was leaving, Matt said, "Actually, there's a nice girl at my workplace recently. She's young, cute, and healthy." I made the right choice not to inherit an ugly and old gene. I was speechless at his cruel words. I was at my lowest, but I never imagined what would happen when I met Matt again 3 years later. My name is Sarah Brown. I married Matt, who is 2 years younger than me, 2 years ago. I met Matt at work when I was 38, and after his persistent pursuit, we got married. I had given up on marriage, but there are plenty of younger women out there. I like someone independent and calm like you, Sarah. I'm 38, and I might not be able to have children. I don't want children, I just want to be with you, Sarah. No matter what I said, Matt insisted. My marriage partner can only be you, Sarah. I eventually gave in and presented him with one condition for marriage. Just promise me one thing. I'm not so desperate to have children at an older age. Let's not force ourselves to have children. Children are blessings. Matt agreed to this condition, and we got married. Matt, who had always lived at his parents' home, insisted on living there even after marriage. I'm an only child, and I think I'll have to take care of my parents eventually. So, could we live with my parents from the start? Though the thought of living with strangers at this age was daunting. He had chosen to marry me, a leftover. With that thought, I agreed to live with my in-laws, Kevin and Rachel. However, I soon realized this was a mistake. Sarah, I'll need you to do the shopping, cooking, dishwashing, taking out the trash, and cleaning the bath. With 4 adults living together, why was I the only one who had to do so much? I couldn't say it out loud, but I felt distrustful of them from the start. They seemed to think of me as a maid. Sarah, I'd like to eat steak today. Sarah, the entrance is getting dirty. Please clean it. Sarah, iron my shirts. What kind of life had the 3 of them been leading? My in-laws' house wasn't dirty. So someone must have been taking care of the household chores before I arrived. This realization made me even more upset. Moreover, my in-laws were overjoyed at their only son, Matt, getting married, expecting a grandchild soon. You're almost 40. It's time to give up and start infertility treatments. No, we're fine without children. What are you talking about? There's no point in getting married if you're not going to have children. My in-laws condemned me for choosing not to have children, as if it was unthinkable. Well, we're not young anymore, so we decided not to get too worked up about having children. Initially, Matt remembered our agreement and tried to convince his parents. However, they were quite persistent. No matter how much Matt persuaded them, in a few days, the "when will we have a grandchild?" questions would start again. One day, Matt came into the room, his face red with anger. My mom said that it might be my fault and told me to get checked at the hospital. Because you're not getting pregnant. Matt's pride as a man was hurt, and he began to take it out on me. No, it's not my fault. Matt was just upset on his own. Of course, I didn't say it out loud, but my frustration grew day by day. I'll prove it's your fault we can't have children. Let's go to the hospital. Finally, Matt said this. However, I had no intention of undergoing fertility treatments. So I ignored what Matt said and lied about being busy at work to escape from my in-laws' house. Mom, listen to this. The only saving grace was that my parents' house was near my office. Before going home, I would stop by my parents' house to vent my frustrations and then return home. At home, my retired parents, Henry and Diane, who were enjoying their retirement, were waiting for me. How did they feel about their daughter, who had finally married in her 40s? Suddenly venting about her in-laws and husband? At first, I felt sorry for bothering my parents. But they listened to my complaints as if they were a snack to accompany their drink. What's wrong, Sarah? A neighbor gave us some delicious wine. Let's drink it together. Maybe it was because my parents took it so lightly that I could complain to them. Why does everyone have this marriage equals children or mindset? Plus, pregnancy and childbirth are tough on women. Yet my husband's parents have the nerve to complain. People are just set in their ways, especially as they get older. I've been told I'm quite flexible. Henry, you've just softened with age. Maybe Matt will turn out like you. Over time, our current situation will probably become a laughing matter. This way, my parents always encouraged me. Having my parents on my side made me feel supported. And I was able to continue my married life somehow. Then, one day on my way home from work, I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my lower abdomen. What is this pain? The pain was so severe that I broke out in a cold sweat and couldn't stand. So I sat down on the sidewalk. I tried to reach for my phone to call for help. But my hands were shaking so much that I couldn't find it. Fortunately, a passerby noticed me and called an ambulance. At the hospital, after various tests, I was told there might be a possibility of ovarian cancer. Can you contact your family immediately? I called Matt, but it was past 7 p.m., and he should have been home by then. However, he didn't answer the phone no matter how many times I called. So, I had no choice but to call my mother. I'll come right away. Don't worry, Sarah. My mom encouraged me, and soon she and my dad came to the hospital. As soon as I saw my parents' faces, tears started flowing. Even after turning 40, I wasn't strong enough to face cancer alone. My mother gently stroked my back, comforting me. Together with my parents, I heard about my medical condition from the doctor. There's a high likelihood that your right ovary has cancer. We recommend the removal of both ovaries and the uterus, but does that mean I won't be able to get pregnant? Yes. Were you hoping to get pregnant, Ms. Brown? That is. I faltered. At 41, I honestly didn't desperately want children. But given how much my in-laws and Matt had been pressuring me for a child, I felt a moment's resistance to making myself unable to bear children. If I wanted to get pregnant, are there other treatments available? I asked timidly. You must think of your body first. My parents looked worried. The doctor looked at me intently and said quietly, there are methods, but whether they are applicable to you requires further testing. My parents were probably surprised that I was concerned about pregnancy. So was I. I couldn't articulate my feelings well, but the thought of having my ovaries and uterus completely removed, having never had children, left me feeling indescribably empty. Maybe if I don't give up and try hard, Matt, Kevin, and Rachel might reconsider their view of me. That thought crossed my mind. I can't give up on pregnancy completely. Can we opt to keep one ovary? The doctor looked into my eyes and nodded. I understand how you feel, Ms. Brown. However, depending on the progress, a total removal might still be necessary. Following the discussion with the doctor, it was decided that I would undergo surgery to remove my diseased right ovary in 5 days. If the cancer is confined to the right ovary, we would observe and possibly use chemotherapy. If there's any spread, please give up on the idea of pregnancy. I nodded firmly. Thankfully, my parents quietly supported my decision and stayed by my side. My mother visited me daily in the hospital, showing concern for my low spirits. Have you heard from Matt? No. He won't answer his phone. And he hasn't responded to my emails about being hospitalized. I don't understand what's going on with Matt. My parents were silent, apparently not having realized the extent to which my relationship with my spouse had deteriorated. He must be busy. Don't worry about anything, like laundry. Henry and I have plenty of time. Oh. I'll buy your favorite pears later. My mother tried to keep the mood light to prevent me from feeling down. Their warmth was deeply felt. I have to do my best in the surgery for my parents. Just as I had this thought, Matt and my in-laws barged into my hospital room the day before the surgery. I glared at the three of them. Why are you ignoring my calls and emails? Matt responded with a nonchalant grin. Seems like you've been through a lot. Well done. Expecting an apology for not contacting me, I was speechless. How could he speak as if it were someone else's problem that his wife was undergoing surgery? My anger bubbled up, and I glared at them even more fiercely. Seeing my reaction, they whispered among themselves and then looked at me with smirks. Leave. I don't want to see your faces. Unable to hold back, I yelled at them, forgetting I was in a hospital. Then, Matt walked up to me and presented a piece of paper. If you have your ovaries removed, you can't have children, right? I don't need you anymore, so can you divorce me? The paper Matt thrust in front of me was a divorce form. Wait, what are you talking about? I won't forgive you if you're joking in this situation. This is no joke. I've been putting up with this until now. No, it was me who had been enduring all this time. Why do I have to be the one presented with a divorce form? Especially when I am about to have surgery tomorrow? Anger, sadness, despair. My emotions are a mess, and I cover my face. Then, as if to add insult to injury, I hear my in-laws' voices. A useless woman who can't bear children should quietly step aside. Clinging to a younger husband at your age is disgraceful. These 3 years have been a waste for Matt. Please disappear from our sight soon. Their words tear my heart to shreds. The fact that I chose treatment to retain the possibility of pregnancy. Thinking of the three of them now seems foolish. What is this treatment? I'm stunned when Matt places the divorce form and a pen on the bedside table. All you have to do is sign your name, and it's done. I'll go file it, so you should at least be grateful. Saying this, Matt forces a pen into my right hand. I'm not opposed to divorcing, per se. In fact, living with my in-laws and being subjected to their sarcasm until we have a child feels unbearable. But I endured their tyranny for these 3 years. I endured it because we were family. They must have seen me as nothing more than a childbearing machine. My resentment towards the 3 of them, who wouldn't even offer me a shred of support as I faced surgery for cancer, was profound. I bite my lip to hold back tears and, with great effort, steady my trembling right hand with my left to scribble my name. Good, now you and I are complete strangers. Saying this, Matt puts the divorce form in his inner pocket. The 3 of them, looking satisfied, leave the hospital room. At the last moment, Matt turns back to say, "Actually, there's a nice girl at my workplace recently. She's young, cute, and healthy. She has nothing in common with you." I made the right choice not to inherit an ugly and old gene. As I glare at Matt, he mockingly says, "Glad to be divorced from the old hag," and leaves. In the now quiet hospital room, only the sound of my sniffles can be heard. Matt and the others have pushed me, already crushed by illness and uncertainty, even deeper into despair. I bury my face in the pillow and cry loudly. After some time, I hear a knock at the door and hastily cover my face with the blanket, pretending to be asleep. "Sarah, you're asleep, huh? I've peeled some pears for you to eat later." The voice belongs to my mother, who always enters the room without knocking. She quietly comes in and places a container of pears on the table. "I'll move all your stuff to our house today. After you're discharged, maybe you can help with the laundry. Oh, and your father has started cooking. Look forward to his cooking. I'll come again tomorrow morning." My mother gently strokes my head, which was sticking out from the blanket, and then leaves the room. She seemed to know everything without me saying a word. Maybe she overheard the divorce conversation with Matt and the others outside the room. Feeling my mother's endless kindness and warmth, I cry again. After crying and feeling a bit better, I lift my face. The pears in the container are cut into bite-sized pieces for easy eating. "Mom, thank you." As I enjoy the juicy pears, images of my parents' smiling faces come to mind. I must get better soon and repay my parents. I decide to focus on my treatment with the goal of easing my parents' worries. The next day, I undergo surgery to remove my right ovary. The right ovary was indeed cancerous, but fortunately, the left ovary was normal. I am to undergo chemotherapy to target any unseen cancer cells. The first round of chemotherapy was tough due to side effects and not being a good match for the medication. I couldn't eat, and I could see myself losing hair and becoming increasingly frail. However, my parents always encouraged me by my side. "Last night, I saw your favorite meteor shower. I found 5 shooting stars and made wishes on them, so you're definitely going to get better." The fact that my father, who supposedly had no interest in meteor showers, stayed up late to watch the sky made me feel his love and the warmth of family anew. Thanks to them, I was able to maintain a strong will to fight for them. After 6 months in the hospital, I switched to outpatient treatment. If no one uses it, it quickly gathers dust. It's a relief that Sarah is coming back to help. My parents didn't ask about the divorce. They naturally took me back to our family home as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I couldn't immediately return to society, so I spent some time recuperating at home. Supported by my parents, I gradually began to regain my former self. Then, as the second year after my surgery dawned, I had always spent Christmas holidays doing nothing until my illness. But having experienced cancer, I made sure to lead a healthy, regular life at all times. That was a good workout. As usual, after finishing my morning walk and about to enter the house, the mailman arrived and handed me the Christmas cards. Flipping through them, I saw one with a baby's photo. The card was addressed to Matt. While I was battling my illness, Matt, who had left me, seemed to have found happiness on his own and even fulfilled his parents' wish by having a child. What did he want by letting me know this fact? Seeing the Christmas card didn't make me feel good, but Matt was already a stranger to me. There's no need to waste my nerves on a stranger. I decided to move on. Also, if my parents found this card, it would undoubtedly upset them. Thinking this, as soon as I entered the house, I tore up the Christmas card and threw it in the trash, making sure my parents would never know. After the new year, I made my return to society. Since my family home was only 2 stations away from the company, I could commute to work without overexerting myself. How was the healthy lunchbox? It was delicious, thank you as always. Every day, my father prepared a nutritionally balanced lunchbox for me, going to work. My father, who never cooked when I lived at home, making lunchboxes. I was deeply moved. Dad, you're really good at cooking. Could you always cook? Whispering to my mother, she shook her head. Henry got all excited, saying, I'll make Sarah's lunchbox. He has significantly improved his cooking skills over the past few months. Seeing my father humming while packing the lunchbox, I could tell he was genuinely happy that I was in good spirits. No matter how old their children get, parents give their unconditional love in this way. I wish to become a parent who could give unconditional love like my dad and mom. I found myself smiling vaguely at the thought. Having only one ovary left, unfortunately, it wasn't necessary for me, a single woman. But, I have to stay healthy for my parents. And one day, I'll definitely repay them. That was what I firmly decided. Since then, I had been living healthy and tranquil days, but one day, Matt and my in-laws suddenly appeared in front of me. They were waiting for me to return from work in front of my parents' house. Sarah. When Matt spotted me, he murmured my name. And the 3 of them knelt down without regard for the eyes around them. I was wrong, please let's start over. What is he saying now? Especially since Matt already has a child. Furious at the irresponsible Matt and my in-laws, who followed him and kneeled down together like they were nothing more than hangers-on. As I glared at them in silence, Matt began to speak bit by bit. I was deceived. According to Matt, he married the young woman from his workplace immediately after our divorce because she was already pregnant. I was furious to learn he had been unfaithful while we were still married, even though it was too late. Following the birth of their son, as shown in the Christmas card, he believed he was leading a blissful life. However, it turned out his current wife had another man on the side, discovered when Matt, suspicious of her always stepping outside to take calls and never leaving her smartphone unattended, resolutely hired a detective. Shockingly, the son he believed was his turned out to be the child of his wife's affair. When confronted, his wife admitted to the affair and the child's paternity nonchalantly. She then brazenly said, "Of course, I prefer my boyfriend's genes over those of an ugly old man like you." Sounds like a familiar line. Hearing this, Matt hung his head. "I'm truly sorry. I finally understand how much wrong we did to you." Following Matt, his parents also apologized. "I won't say anything about children anymore, so can you come back and live with me?" As you can see, my parents are also regretful. What audacious people they are. After all they've done, I couldn't fathom the nerve of these 3 showing up in front of me. And I had no intention of engaging in conversation. Just then, my parents and a man emerged from the house. Having heard the commotion at the entrance. Guests? What are you people doing here? My mother, seeing Matt and his parents kneeling in front of me, screamed in disbelief. The man behind my parents was initially surprised by my mother's reaction. But then, realizing the situation, quickly came to my side. Please stay away from my wife. He stood in front of Matt and his parents, protecting me. Matt and his parents were dumbfounded. Your wife? What do you mean, Sarah? This has to be a joke. Why would he think it's a joke? I seized the moment to counter. Sorry, but I married him. Thanks to you initiating the divorce that time. I found someone who loves me for who I am, not just as a childbearing machine. I tightly clasped the arm of the man beside me, showing him off to Matt and his parents. He was a colleague from work who had taken over my duties while I was off, and after returning, he helped ensure I didn't overexert myself. Gradually, the time I spent with him grew longer. Being with Sarah, I've learned to appreciate the small joys in life. Please marry me. He had proposed, accepting me completely, and we registered our marriage 6 months ago. Wait, is that a maternity mark on your bag? That's when my mother-in-law noticed the maternity mark on my bag and screamed. Matt, seeing the maternity mark, furrowed his brows and glared at me intensely. You said you were getting your ovaries removed. Did you lie to me? Lying is the lowest of the low. Enjoying playing the tragic heroine, are you? As before, my in-laws joined in complaining. You're the ones who unilaterally pushed for divorce without listening to me. You wanted children so badly. Yet you wouldn't even listen when I chose to keep one ovary in the slight chance that I could get pregnant, would you? Recalling the situation, I was boiling with anger. Sensing my fury, my husband soothed my back to calm me. My wife has endured harsh chemotherapy and is still fighting hard with her remaining ovary. Please stay away from my precious wife. If you break this promise, we will take legal action. Matt and his parents, intimidated by his authority, backed off without a word. Came here thinking of taking care of you as a maid in our house. Since you're single, well, struggle with high-risk pregnancy if you want. Matt left with his parents in defeat. My parents rushed to me. Sarah, are you okay? Really? If they show up again, I won't let them off. Seeing the pain I went through, my parents' faces were filled with anger. I will always protect Sarah. Please don't worry, Diane and Henry. His strong words finally eased me and my parents. Later, my mother heard from somewhere that Matt had forced his new wife to live with his parents just like me. Listening to Matt's story, one might think they were splendidly deceived by the new wife. But that wasn't entirely true. They had disregarded me because I couldn't get pregnant, assuming the new pregnant wife would be treated kindly. However, that wasn't the case at all. They didn't care for her well-being, made her do housework, and even carry heavy things without concern. Neighbors who saw her struggling with groceries for 4, despite her pregnant belly, were so worried they helped her carry her bags. Of course, the woman who had an affair with Matt before our marriage, deceiving him and his parents by having another man's child, was also in the wrong. However, no one could sympathize with Matt and his parents, who had exploited her to the extent that she felt no guilt. Matt and his parents, who twice made their spouses live with them, treating them like maids and then divorcing them shortly after. Bad rumors about them spread in the neighborhood, and nobody wanted to associate with Matt's family anymore. Despite this, they seemed to be desperately searching for another bride. But as soon as Matt brought a woman home, the neighbors would quickly inform her about these rumors. Thanks to that, there were no more victims of Matt and his parents. And the three of them are currently living a meager existence, subjected to odd looks from the neighborhood. Was their house a mess before Sarah married into it? No, it was kept reasonably clean. I think Rachel must have been managing the household chores properly when there was no daughter-in-law. I see. My mother nodded in understanding. Recently, Rachel has been unwell, probably due to her age. It seems Matt has been taking care of Rachel while working, but with just the two men. They're struggling to maintain the house, which has started to deteriorate recently. They brought it upon themselves. They have no choice but to manage as the blood-related family of three. They need to reflect deeply on how they have mistreated their marital partners in the past. Mom, I'm home. Just then, my daughter and husband returned. Emma. We've been waiting. Let's play with Grandma. Upon seeing her mother, my daughter rushed into her arms with the brightest smile. She turned 2 this year. When my daughter was born, both my husband and parents cried and thanked me. There was a time when I wondered why I chose to undergo treatment to save one ovary. And I felt truly sorry for my parents who silently supported my decision. But now, I have no regrets at all. Because I've been able to have such a wonderful family. After giving birth, our family of 3 started living in an apartment close to my parents' house. My parents would come over under various pretenses like, I made too much food. Or, I got vegetables from a friend. I've resigned myself to the fact that at this age, having another child is out of the question. But I'm grateful that my daughter doesn't feel lonely even without siblings. As my parents play with her. Grandma, you're eating with us, right? Is that okay, Sarah? Of course. Call Dad too. Thank you. There were pears in the fridge, so I'll have your dad bring them over. Warm and ordinary conversations filled the room. Despite experiencing bullying, divorce, and illness, I'm living happy days thanks to my parents and my current husband. And my daughter, who came to me when I had almost given up on being a mother to give. Unconditional love like my parents has made my life shine even brighter. Mom, this is for you. My daughter placed an acorn she had picked up at the park into my palm. Wow, thank you. I'll treasure it. I hugged my daughter tightly. Together with my family. I want to cherish these small moments of happiness and continue living a life full of love.